phytoplankton. They're all Krabby Patty zombie monsters, and they're forcing everybody to eat them.
Not everything under the sea is bright and innocent. Hidden beneath SpongeBob's familiar smile are episodes that feel more like psychological horror than children's entertainment. These aren't just strange stories, they're disturbing, creeping under your skin with a sense of dread that lingers long after the credits roll. What you're about to see isn't funny, it's unsettling, and it proves that even the most colorful worlds can cast dark shadows. It started one night after closing hours. It was the end of the shift. SpongeBob was at the Krusty Krab, at the kitchen hiss and smell of burnt grease. He was thinking a jingle he picked up earlier while he was humming something, innocent at first. But he didn't stop. But the tune wasn't stuck in his head, it was being fed, a rhythm that wouldn't stop until it replied. Irritated by the day already, Squidward told him to quit it. But the song kept coming, louder. SpongeBob certainly didn't even know he was doing it like that. When the place finally closed down, Mr. Krabs sent the guys home, but SpongeBob couldn't be bothered. The streets of Bikini Bottom were empty and echoed outside where they were. The same tune leaked from a dusty record player inside a shop window as he passed it. He froze. It was unnatural, the repetition, like the melody had been meant to follow him, or perhaps it had chosen him. SpongeBob played the record again and again back at his pineapple home. Time slipped away. Dancing in the flickering lamplight, he said the lyrics like they were his own thoughts. Hours passed. He didn't notice. He should have succumbed to peace when he finally collapsed into his bed. Instead, he awoke to his own sound, but he had not awakened to silence. A faint whistle. Identical to the song, only he wasn't whistling. His body was. Panic set in. They clamped their hands over their ears, pressed them up to their maws, but the music was inside now, crawling around his skull. He had been given a sickening realization. Something had gotten itself embedded inside his brain, literally growing deeper with each note. Not a metaphorical earworm, a real presence. The next day, SpongeBob came in hollow-eyed, pale, trembling to work. Every word spoken to him warped into the melody. Even the kitchen's clatter beat to its rhythm. He tried to resist it, to keep his mind intact, but he failed. Overwhelmed, he burst into a frenzy of singing and erratic movements, disrupting customers, breaking things, laughing without meaning to. Krabs warned him. One more outburst, and he was done. SpongeBob begged, his voice cracked, his smile gone, but the song was louder than reason. Eventually he ran, out into the streets, the tune echoing, his sanity unraveling. Sandy found him first. What she saw wasn't SpongeBob, it was something else. Wide-eyed, mumbling lyrics with no awareness of self. She gathered Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and Patrick, and they cornered him in his home. He resisted. Fought. But they restrained him. Sandy, analyzing his behavior, realized the truth. A parasite had latched onto him, one that fed on obsessive thought. They needed to counter it. Only another melody, stronger and purer, could expel it. Their attempts failed. Until Squidward stepped forward. He played something slow, dissonant, full of pain and silence. But later, alone in his room, Squidward began humming his own tune, and something answered from deep within. As always, the Krusty Krab's lunch rush started like it always does. Served sizzling and golden were 2 Krabby Patties in the style SpongeBob always does with his grill. But the customers weren't pleased. Not this time. Not in anger because that was a restaurant. Not in eerie, synchronized contention, just an eerie, synchronized disappointment. They weren't angry. They were hungry for something new. Eyes beaming at the scent of profit, Mr. Krabs gave them the promise of a surprise. He ushered SpongeBob off to the back of the kitchen and he worked some kind of rusted steel door. There was only a few that knew the passage behind it. Fewer had seen what was inside, a laboratory surrounded by beakers, glowing vats, and a quiet that was not confined to the natural. Sandy stood in the middle. What she had created was an evolution of the classic patty, synthetic. It looked real, smelled real. But SpongeBob felt it. The surface was wrong some way. When he was uneasy to the idea, he ignored his feelings and ordered mass production. Sandy returned a few minutes later with trays of steaming artificial patties. The crowd devoured them. Silence followed. No complaints, not even satisfaction. Just silence. Then Mr. Krabs twitched. His limbs convulsed subtly at first, then violently. His spine warping, he collapsed behind the register, convulsing. The round bumps pushed outward beneath his shell. Sesame seeds. His skin split like wax paper. He was the first to change. Sandy was next. Her suit cracked. Her voice turned to static. Each one of the kids kept following the rest of the restaurant. The patrons, the staff, not even the children all started to morph. Bones bending, skin bubbling, heads jerking off their bodies, jaws dislocating. They bloomed across their bodies with patty-like tumors. There was only SpongeBob and Frank, one customer, until Frank was caught. Frank was shoved flesh from one creature into his mouth as another creature tore flesh from its own form. He changed within seconds. SpongeBob ran. He found refuge in a dumpster behind the Krusty Krab, shivering beneath a veil of grease and cardboard. But he could hear them, the gurgling moans, the wet, slapping feet. They were spreading, mailmen, shoppers, friends. Even Patrick, devoured and reborn. He wasn't alone for long. Perch Perkins, broadcasting the apocalypse, found SpongeBob and demanded answers. But before the report could finish, Squidward emerged from the shadows. He shoved a grotesque piece of himself into Perch's throat. The cameraman convulsed. The feed died. Before changing, Perch whispered one name, Plankton. Desperate, SpongeBob fled to the chum bucket. Plankton mocked him, until the infected broke down the doors. Karen was consumed first, then Plankton himself, lifted and fed on by Mrs. Puff. Cornered, SpongeBob climbed a mountain of chum sacks to escape. He slipped. A bag tore, chum spilled, Patrick swallowed some and changed back. The antidote was clear, chum. SpongeBob fought back with buckets of it, curing the town one scoop at a time. When it was over, the customers apologized. They didn't want innovation anymore. They wanted tradition. Though this episode had no tragic emotions or inner collapse like others, it was drenched in grotesque horror. The transformations, the body horror, the feeding. It didn't break the mind. It shattered the body. But the darkest tale still waits in the shadows. However, the Krusty Krab was unusually tense. Not with hunger, but with authority. A new customer had entered. He was the health inspector. By the time the door opened, Krabs was still in his office and had caught his scent. Panic set in fast. He ran to the kitchen and cried out to SpongeBob, "One mistake and we're gone forever." Everything was ordered by the inspector. There was no room for error within every dish. Despite the fact that Krabs hated giving free food, this was not about the money. Then, one after another, plates flew out. They had surely passed the test. All that was left was the plain Krabby Patty. When they exhaled, just as they would do when relaxing, a breaking news bulletin appeared on the TV. Someone was impersonating a health inspector, conning restaurants for free meals in a warning. They were convinced Krabs had been duped, and Krabs exploded in rage. Retaliate he and SpongeBob decided to. The inspector would be fed a punishment dressed as food if he was a fraud. Turning their wits to this, they forged the nasty patty, filth and spite shaped and held together by vileness, stink and cruelty. However, fate intervened before the inspector could take a bite. His throat was suddenly filled with a rogue insect, which caused him to choke violently. They saw him writhe on the floor from behind the grill with his eyes swelling shut, wrongly thinking that the monstrous patty was the reason. Helping they were not, instead they laughed, horrified at what they believed they had done, but unable to think. The man fell to his exit, heading for the exit, and his head smashed into a rock. Silence. A fake inspector had been caught. The next news report. The man lying unconscious on their floor. He was the real health inspector. Sweating bullets, Krabs spiraled into damage control. They thought that it was a crime they were trying to cover up, and he manipulated SpongeBob into helping him. Together, they hoisted the limp body into the night. SpongeBob trembled. Krabs barked orders. They buried it somewhere at the edge of Bikini Bottom. Krabs showed no remorse. SpongeBob, pale and shell-shocked, obeyed. The inspector was buried, and their aim was to leave the memory in the dirt. The past, however, was not done with them. Rain fell. The mud washed away. A police car just dumped them a ride, slid uphill, the body shifted, slid downhill, right beside them. Krabs was in panic, so he had SpongeBob toss the body in the trunk. The plan was for him to be stashed in the freezer, then back at the Krusty Krab. However, Krabs panicked when a cop wanted more ice and confessed blaming SpongeBob. The freezer was opened, empty. The inspector stumbled back into the restaurant suddenly and was alive, dazed, and badly bruised. Starring, the officers struck him down again, mistaking him for a zombie, but he wasn't dead. He never had been. He approved the restaurant so that he would not fear further violence. Guilt, denial, betrayal are the themes of this episode. The blackest part wasn't the fake death, it was SpongeBob, an innocent being given to carry the weight of a supposed corpse while Krabs used him as a pawn. No grief, no empathy, just fear of getting caught. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and comment.